What's going on, guys, and welcome to the sixth video in the C# tutorial series. So this video we're going to focus on if statements. So we're going to hold off on the object orientation because of the fact that we still have a few things to go over, because once we dive into object orientation, it really starts to evolve and snowball from there. Okay, so we want to make sure we have a good understanding on C# with some basic stuff like if statements, switch statements, loops, and stuff like that you're probably familiar with other languages. And so that way, once we transition in how to do these things syntax-wise in C#, we can move into the object orientation aspect of it. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to start a project, and we're just going to go over and play around with some if statements. Okay. So that way we can check it out and get acquainted with how to use them and just the syntax of it, which really isn't too much different from most languages. All right. So we have, of course, our template. And in its simplest form, an if statement just has if and then the expression, so the clause, okay? So if it's true, something will execute, and only then will it execute. Now, of course, this will always execute because it's true. Now, what about you? And you can put expressions inside of here as well. You can do 3 greater than 5. And of course, this will never execute because 3 will never be greater than 5. And then 5 will always be greater than 3, so this will always execute, okay? So to do things like this obviously is pretty redundant because of the fact that if it's always going to execute, if it's always not going to execute, what's the use of having an if statement at all, right? So, but this is just to get the point across, of course. Now, so let's go ahead and let's make a little small program of a program that asks the user how old they are and then responds with something depending on how old they are, okay? So what we can do is we can have a string. All right, and we can have a age, and what we can do is do console.read line, and what that will do will halt the program and wait for input to happen, okay, in which we will put in when this occurs. Now we're gonna need an actual integer for the age to hold it, okay? So we'll hit age holder, and you'll see what I mean here in a second. So once we come down here, so this at this point we have the age, okay? Now what we can do is if we do age, if age is greater than 12, it's going to throw a little bit of an error. And that's because this is a string, and this is what console.readLine will return, is a string, right? But it obviously wants us to have an integer. And what we could do is something weird, but what the easier way to do it is just to do a try parse, okay? And we want to parse this string and make it an integer, okay? So what we could do now is we can do int.tryParse, all right, and this will try to parse it as an integer, okay, and it says, okay, the first value is the input, so the input is the age, and then we want to do out, it's a keyword is out, and age holder, and this will output to this variable right here, all right. Now we can use age holder instead of age because age holder is now a integer, and we can do 12, and this will now work, okay? So what this is doing, guys, just really quick, is just basically parsing this and putting it into this variable right here, all right? Now, if it is greater than 12, you put greater than 12, then we're going to respond to the user and just tell them, hey, you are older than 12. Obviously. So there you go. So now what we can do is run this and see, of course, what's going to happen, and just get a little more acquainted with the if statements. All right. So let's go ahead and run this, and let's actually make a prompt, okay, make it a little more official right here. So we'll do write line, and then we'll do how old are you? All right. How old are you? All right. We can do I am 11. And notice that nothing happens, okay? That's because this never got a chance to execute, all right? And of course, if we do come into here and we put a number like 444 years old, hey, you are older than 12. All right, so that time it did execute. But notice the first time that it didn't, and that's because obviously that it came in right here and nothing happened, and it actually executed it and it went out of this and it never executed inside of this block. All right. And the way that we could do that, we can handle it, is we can do an else, or we can use an else if. All right. So let's do an else, and that's like this. An else is with respect to the the preceding if. Okay. So if it's the first if that it follows after, that the else follows after. Okay. So this else follows after, immediately after this if. Therefore, it's going to be coupled with this if. Okay. Now, if we had another one like, what I mean by this is if we had another one like this, what's going to happen is that this if has no else companion, because this else is basically companioned with this if, because it immediately follows after it. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Now, the else is, we can do something like, hey, you are 12 or under. All right, so now when we enter in 11 again, it'll say, hey, you are 12 or under. So now we have an else clause, basically a default if all else fails. Okay, so what if this handles if you are 12, greater than 12. This handles if anything else. But what if you want to see if you exactly are 12? Well, that's what the else if is for. Okay, so the else if is the intermediary between these if and the else, and it checks on another condition. So we can do age holder double equals 12, and we can do console write line, hey, you are 12. All right, so there you go. I mean, now if we actually put in 12, of course it's going to say, hey, you are 12. So now what we can do is okay, if you are greater than 12 and age holder is less than 20, then you are a teenager, right? So 13, anywhere from 13 to 19. So, hey, you are a teenager. So this condition will only fire when age holder is greater than 12 and age holder is less than 20, or in other words, between 13, including 13 and 19 in between them. Okay. Now, notice that this stuff right here we can now delete, and if we do, of course, like 14, hey, you are a teenager. Cool. Now, what if we want to have more than one? Okay, so what we can do is we can do if age holder is greater than, say, 21. And then we can have another one that says if age holder is less than 10. Now, what's going to happen, because we have 3 ifs, all of these will be checked. Okay, so even if one of them executes, then all of these are still going to be checked. Now, we can demonstrate that by doing something like older than 21. And then we can do younger than 10. So these will all execute even if all of them are true or not true. Okay, so I mean, if they are all true in some sense, then they will all execute. So what I'm trying to get at is, if you put 19, let me make this a little more clear for everyone. So if we do, say, 15, okay, and if we do 18, all right. So if we put, like, say 14 in here, then these will all execute because this is true, and then that's what I meant, and then younger than 18, and then this is true. Okay, so and then of course if you put 14, this is true. So let's go ahead and demonstrate that now. So notice that all of them executed. So yes, you are a teenager. Yes, you are younger than 18. Yes, you are younger than 15. So all of these are true. And why am I doing this? Well, because the fact that this is what really kind of differentiates between an if and then using an else if. So an else if now, if you come into here and do else if, now only one of these will execute and only the first true one will execute. Okay, so the first condition that is true will execute, and then all of these else ifs that are accompanying the if will be skipped. All right, and we can go ahead and demonstrate this. So notice that only this executed, okay? And then if that's not clear enough, what we can do is actually switch back to the if where all of these execute, put a breakpoint here, and we can do 14 again. And notice right here we have our breakpoint. So it comes into here, it goes into there, and then it also goes in here because they are all true, and then every true statement will execute. All right. Now let's go back to the else if, and let's set a breakpoint. And I'm just doing this because it may be more clear. Sometimes it's more clear for me when you actually can see the code running live. All right. So let's go ahead and put in 14, and notice that the if executes, and then it just doesn't even check this stuff right here because else if, that's the difference. It will only one will execute, and this helps for like really cleaning up your code and speeding up your code. When you only need, like in your code, one thing to execute, one true thing, the first true thing to execute, use an else if, because that way it doesn't keep checking, redundantly, and then just wastes your time and then slows down your program. However, if you do want everything to check and you want every true condition to be executed upon, then of course do the if and all the ifs. Okay, so those are the main difference between using the if and the else if. And then of course you can have a default that will always execute if nothing else executes, like you can say, nothing else was true, sad face. All right, and that will maybe apply for, like, if you put in, of course, how old are you, and then we did like some huge number, nothing else is true because it came into here. So if you want a default, use else. If you don't want anything to be checked, or if you want only one thing to be true, and then of course leave that block like how it did, use this. But yeah, if you do want everything to be checked at least once, then of course just keep using the if statements. Okay, and that's the main difference between those two. All right, so there you have it, guys. That's just a quick little video on how to use if statements, and just some really common stuff that we'll be using when we go deeper into this tutorial series. So the next video, we're going to look at switch statements, okay, which are another way to actually have our code execute and change the flow of it. All right, and switch statement is just another way basically to have our program follow direction and in different orders, and they are a little different, and sometimes they are actually a little more convenient to use than just a whole bunch of ifs. Okay, so we're going to go over that in the next video. All right, thanks for watching, guys.